And in the spirit of our journey to promote reconciliation, we honor the truth of our shared history and acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10 regions of Alberta, and the Métis people of Alberta regions 1 to 6. We also recognize the Inuit people who have made their home here in Mohkinstsis, also known as Calgary, which is where I am based. Of course, all of you are based in different areas, so we recognize the folks that have made their home in your areas of location. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. So my name is Kim Brundred. I'm with Dementia Network Calgary, and I'm part of this disaster and emergency preparedness group on CORE. Kim Savard is also here. Maybe Kim, you can give us a wave. She's part of this group as well, and we're looking for new folks, so we'll talk about that more at the end. But if you're interested in this topic, we would love to have you join our group on CORE. And today we're very pleased to have Amanda Sheppard with us. Amanda has been with the Vulnerable Person Registry in Sault Ste Marie for about the last 4 years. As part of some of the work that Kim and I are doing, we did a bit of a scan around Canada to see where VPRs exist and who's using them. And everyone kept telling us, you need to talk to Sault Ste Marie, you need to talk to Sault Ste Marie. So they are very open and willing to share their information with us. So I will turn it over to Amanda to do her presentation. And when she's finished, we'll definitely have time for a Q&A afterwards. So feel free to either put your questions in the chat or save them until the Q&A. And welcome, Amanda.
Hi, hold on. I'm just going to get my PowerPoint up. So there you go. Everybody can see the lovely PowerPoint now? Excellent. So I'm Amanda Sheppard, as Kim introduced. I've been with the Vulnerable Persons Registry for 4 years now. It is hosted under what is called the Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Center. So that's technically who my employer is, and they run and host the Vulnerable Persons Registry here. For reference as well, this is Shannon. She's going to be taking over as the Vulnerable Persons Registry Coordinator. She is great and amazing, and if you have any questions down the road or later on, she is fantastic and will be able to help and assist you kind of moving forward with things. But I'm gonna be going forward right now, and I'll tell you all about our registry, kind of how it works and what happens. So there we go. So what is our Vulnerable Persons Registry, or I'll also be calling it our VPR. For the first little bit, I'll try and say Vulnerable Persons Registry, but eventually I will just shorten it to VPR, and those are the same thing in what I'm talking about. So it's a free and confidential service aimed at helping the most vulnerable individuals during large-scale emergencies. We take the information and put it into our database and give that database, give access to emergency response teams and emergency management coordinators, access to that information so that they can help and assist individuals during emergencies. The goal of the program is to help that most 1% vulnerable who are often, living by themselves, don't have a lot of assistance or local support, to be able to provide them with extra support, care, and assistance during large-scale emergencies. And the program first started here in 2011. These are our mission statements and vision statements. I won't read them to you because I'm sure you can all just read them yourselves. And I've told Kim I will forward on my presentation for you guys to see as well. So we've been running for, oh boy, my math, now the 12 years, 11 years? 11 years. No, it's 2013. No, it's 2023, sorry. So longer time than that, so 12 years now. So that's when our program first started. The whole initiative and kind of the backstory behind our Vulnerable Persons Registry is we had a Suite named Louis Whalen, who during a summer employment had a tragic accident where he got severely burned. to a power outage and a workplace safety issue that arose during one of his summer jobs, and became an electric dependent person. So he required electricity in order to live. He needed air conditioning because he was unable to regulate his body temperature. So during the 2003 power outage that took out power all over the place, I think Ontario was giant blackout, he's tragically passed away. And he was he was next door from the fire department, and phones were down. So his family was checking in on him, and nobody could get a hold of him. So that kind of is what sparked the initiative for the Vulnerable Persons Registry, because his death was preventable if the registry had been in place in order to just try and prevent and then safeguard individuals from emergency-related deaths. So what does the Vulnerable Persons Registry do? So we kind of have two different branches to our VPR. So the first branch is large-scale emergency base. So later on, you'll see a slide that shows our region for large-scale emergency. It's like, if you picture the map of Ontario, you take kind of just the middle chunk around Lake Superior and Lake Huron, and that's kind of our geographic area. Like I said, there'll be a map that'll show you it. And what we do is we work with all of those townships in those areas, so about 50 townships. And we work with them to get their most vulnerable people on our list, so that if there's ever any sort of large-scale emergency in their township, they can pull up a list of the most vulnerable people, where they live, what their vulnerabilities are, and be able to provide them with extra support, care, and assistance during those large-scale emergencies. Because of the unique way our systems also work, is that there's also some smaller scale emergencies, which I have some examples again later on in our slides. The VPR can also be used for some smaller scale emergencies. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like the entire town is flooded out, we have to evacuate the whole town. Who do I need to help and assist first? It can simply be like a big section of town or a part of town is flooded out. Let's check on our most vulnerable people who have been flooded out and make sure they're doing okay, make sure they're receiving support. So there's both kind of the large scale and small scale. It kind of depends on our emergency management coordinators and how they want to respond to what they're dealing with within their town, and how they want to deal with it. Here in Sault Ste Marie, we have the large scale emergency. So if we ever had to evacuate the city and different things like that, it's used, but it's also integrated into 911 and is used during power outages. So I'll jump back to the 911. So it's used with 911. So we have Sault Ste Marie Police, Sault Ste Marie Fire, and Sault Ste Marie Ambulance, who have agreed to taking on the Vulnerable Persons Registry and integrating it into their system. So it is address based, so that anytime a first responder is being sent to that address, they can see that a vulnerable person is there and be able to click and get more information. So if the fire department is being dispatched to an apartment building, they can pull up and see, I've got Johnny on the 3rd floor, I've got Susan on the 5th floor, and I've got Marie on the 7th floor, who all have some sort of vulnerability. And they can then go click and open into their files and be like, well, Susie has a hearing impairment, she might not have heard the fire alarm, or Johnny is in a wheelchair, let's make sure we can help and assist them, and giving those first responders extra information when they're responding to an emergency to give them a better understanding of what they're walking into, and be able to plan and forecast better based on what's happening there. The registrants, when they're registering, can provide as much information or as little information as they want. They can simply just check boxes, and first responders just know if there's mobility or hearing or vision, or there is room to put a bit more information to be like, well, what is the mobility difficulty? Are you in a wheelchair? Do you just use a walker? But a lot of times in those first responders situations. They just want quick and concise information. So they get quick and concise information in order to help and assist them when responding to emergencies. And then the power outage aspect is we work with our local Sault Ste. Marie PUC electrical utility company. And for any registrant who is on life-sustaining equipment that requires electricity, so like oxygen, dialysis, feeding tubes, different things like that, they get a little bit extra support. That if the power is ever out for more than 6 hours, the PUC is going to work with our Canadian Red Cross to go check on these individuals, make sure they're okay, reaching out to them, doing like if they can't get a hold of them by phone, going to their house and just like making sure they're okay and checking on these individuals. So the information syncs up in with the PUC so that when they see power outages, they can see which vulnerable persons are being affected by the power outage and essentially have like a timer that starts. So as soon as they see that there's a vulnerable person without power, they got a timer that kind of just starts clicking on that person. And then anytime they start getting close to the 5.5 hour mark, they're starting to call in the Red Cross to start the process of making sure those registrants are okay and safe and helping and supporting them during large scale emergencies. The PUC also kind of uses the Vulnerable Persons Registry to help prioritize some things, because if they have 1,000 clients who are without power here and 1,000 clients who are without power on the other side, but like the west side has 5 vulnerable persons who are electric dependent people without power versus the east side only has no electric dependent people, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to prioritize the west side power outage and then we'll move to the east side, that they kind of use it as well to help with some of decision making if they can. And you know, if they're of the same weight, they can look and see this one has more vulnerable or electric dependent people, let's prioritize this over this. So this is our map of Sault Ste. Marie. It shows our eligibility and our jurisdictions for within Sault Ste. Marie. It just kind of shows where our areas cover. And then this is our map that shows our jurisdiction within Ontario. So as you can see, we cover a big chunk of Ontario for our large scale emergency. So that's helping and assisting individuals or townships deal with their large scale emergency, or even their smaller scale emergencies as well. So who can register for our registry? Because we do have to have some sort of eligibility. So it is all self-identifying. So we don't require doctor's notes. We don't require proof. We just essentially need the person who's applying to check one of these boxes. I'll walk through the application form with you and you can see it's a checkbox, but they do have to check one of the boxes to say they've identified as a person with a vulnerability. So they are mobility, vision. I often have to let clients know a vision vulnerability is not just wearing glasses. It has to be some sort of, you know, blindness, level of vision loss. Just wearing glasses doesn't qualify you for you to be on the registry. Any hearing difficulties, and wearing hearing aids does allow you to be qualified, because often individuals don't wear their hearing aids 24/7 because they have to charge. So any sort of developmental, intellectual, or cognitive vulnerability, severe mental health difficulties, trouble with speech or language, including being nonverbal, and then anybody who's on life-sustaining equipment that requires electricity.
Amanda,
yeah.
Amanda, we just have a quick question in the chat around from Jody, just wondering if there's any pushback around using the word vulnerable, as some people react to it as a negative label. I guess you've had this question before. I know some places have moved to using terms like functional needs registry instead of vulnerable. Did those concerns ever come up?
Ooh, those are good. So Shannon is very excited to answer this question. So I'm going to let her answer this question because she has been dealing with this like actually all of yesterday and a little bit before. So I'm just going to slide the computer and she's going to answer that for you.
Hi, so we do agree that some of the verbiage is difficult for some people to buy in. So I'm currently working on some rewording and rebranding of the use of the word vulnerable and also the use of the word registry. We want to be inclusive, especially to our First Nations communities, and having something such as a registry really inhibits people from wanting to sign on. So we are working on that, and I'm doing some research right now about ways we can remarket it to really get to the demographic that we're searching for, which is not necessarily vulnerable people, but people with exceptionalities, people who need this additional support. We're kind of looking for more community emergency preparedness and planning rather than a registry that targets and identifies and singles out people. We're working with Nova Scotia, and they have an Adult Protection Act that identifies the word vulnerable as, so they're concerned about bringing a VPR into that province with that legislation. So we are aware of it, and we are actively working on solutions for that language.
It's definitely a problem we run into. I have a prime example as I was giving a presentation and I was hanging around afterwards to just talk and mingle with some of the clients because I was at a senior drop-in center, and I had like a sweet little old lady who had a walker and who was on oxygen and like walking slowly, and came and told me how much she loved her presentation, but she really wasn't vulnerable. So she didn't need she didn't need this service at this point in time, and walked away. And I had to just be like, oh, but you're my prime example. Like, I could help you so much, but I'm not vulnerable. Like I'm doing just fine on my own. And it's just like, so yes, it is 100% a thing we have to deal with and explain. And I think one thing that kind of helps with us is we just say, well, like, it is free, like it doesn't cost you anything to register. That sometimes we can get the people with the free dig, and that it's free, it's confidential, and there's not a lot of strings attached to it. So sometimes how I get the hook in, that yes, you're not vulnerable, but like it could help you. Like, if things don't get a little, dicey with, large scale emergencies. So it definitely is a big thing, a big hurdle. And it kind of takes an emergency happening somewhere for people to be like, oh, this might be a good idea just to have this extra support. So if I were to show you like a graph of the registrants and people when they register, and probably showed you a graph of like natural disasters that happen places, or like if a big snowstorm hits Sault Ste Marie and the power goes out for a while and things just get a little gross and dicey outside, you can probably see an influx of we get more registrants after there's those big snowstorms or there's those big natural disasters that you read about places. So it definitely is a hurdle with the word vulnerable, and it kind of takes sometimes something happening for somebody to acknowledge that I maybe should be on that list. I might be considered vulnerable. So does that answer the question for you guys? If not, we can move back to it and you can ask more follow-up questions. Like I said, stop me along the way with any questions, and I'm happy to answer. So nobody's interrupting me, so I'll go jump back into what qualifies somebody to be on our registry. So the way we worded our exemption is if you receive 24-hour support, you are not allowed to be on the Vulnerable Persons Registry. And what the reasoning behind that is we don't want to include people who are living in nursing homes, who have 24-hour staff on 24-hour support there, or group homes that have staff that are on call or like in the building all the time. Because in those situations, if there's a large scale emergency, like emergency management coordinators know we have to evacuate the nursing home. We have to You know, they have access to that information already. We don't want to bog down the registry with information that they'll already know, because they already know the nursing home is full of vulnerable people who have to be evacuated. We don't need to have all their names and information on this list, because the nursing home is going to have. Or even like a retirement home that has staff on call all the time and in the building all the time. There's people there to help and support them. The other thing we kind of try to get exemptions for is small children. And there are exceptions to this rule. Like our registry qualifications are very gray. It's not black and white. But we've had individuals who've been like, well, my baby is really vulnerable. Like I need to register my baby. But you're never going to be leaving your baby alone. So your baby has you to support and help them. So it's kind of this fine line of figuring out when an individual has care and support, who can help them during an emergency versus no. So we have the 24-hour support system, and to try and to keep the registry at a manageable number, well, not including people who already have some support. But like I said, it's very gray. So we do have quite a few, like I know my slide says we don't accept children under the age of 18. That's just our guidelines, but there's a lot of gray, and we do actually have quite a few children who are under the age of 18. The bar I kind of use when deciding if somebody should be on the registry or not is, would you leave them to go run to the store to get milk? If you would leave them to go grab milk, then they should be on the registry, because there is a chance that they could be home alone and an emergency happens and they would require that extra support and care. If that answer is no, you would take the time to load them into the car, bring them to go get milk and bring them back, then they are always going to be with you. And that's kind of where our 24-hour support line kind of runs. And we are also but like I said, we have gray situations that we will take and review every case that kind of comes our way and make our decisions. But according to our legal guidelines and like what the official program qualifications are, is no 24-hour support, and usually not under the age of 18, because they would have the support in 24-hour care. So how people can register, we have a website that they can register online. We do phone applications as well. We have a bunch of partner agencies that have applications there that people can go pick up an application from their municipal office, or we try and make sure that there's always applications in doctor's office, hearing societies, and different places like that. So it's an easily accessible application form to get. And we try to just make it as easy as possible. This is what our application form looks like. So this is the first page. I just couldn't make it readable on one slide like this. So this is the first page. So it's a very easy application form. It is 4 pages long, but like the first half of the first page just asks, how did you hear about the program? So as much as it's kind of like, it's 4 pages, it's not as bad and crazy as a 4-page application form sounds. So this is our first page. It just says, how do you hear? And then your general information, contact information, and if they receive home care services or not. A lot of our questions we ask on our application form are to help emergency management coordinators prioritize people when they're trying to deal with an emergency. So there's one question in particular that's very helpful to our emergency management coordinators when they're dealing with a large scale emergency and they have the registry. They can kind of sort registrants by this question so that they know, like, you are my top priority, you are my middle priority, you are my lower end priority of my priority people. Because they're on the registry, they should be priority, but it helps them kind of prioritize the top priority people. So then this is the second and the third page of the application form. So I'll start with the second page, which just has the vulnerabilities and checking off. The first half is all about the vulnerabilities and checking one of the boxes for vulnerabilities. So again, vision, hearing, mobility, bedridden, developmental, cognitive, mental health, or other. And then the life-sustaining equipment of ventilator, oxygen, dialysis, or other. I will not be able to exit my house by stairs. That's a helpful one for fire departments. They really like that question, to be able to know if you're in an apartment building on the 7th floor in a wheelchair, and there's a fire, you're not getting out of your apartment because of obvious reasons. I require electricity for life-sustaining equipment. That has to do with our PUC program. And then they put how many hours they can remain safe. Our program does require a minimum of 6 hours because that's when the Red Cross or the PUC brings in the Red Cross, is they have to be able to remain safe for 6 hours. And then after 6 hours, the Red Cross and the PUC will work together to support them. I do not receive 24-hour support at home is essentially our eligibility question. Another big important one is I have trouble with speech or language. So sometimes that can be simple as, you know, I'm native speaker German. My English is really not very good. And so that's just helpful for them to know and have that information. And then the bottom question is what I was hinting at to earlier of how long can you care for yourself in a large scale emergency? And they give a time block of what their level of preparedness is for an emergency. So I always tell registrants when they're answering this question, because you guys are in Alberta, I'm sure you get these nasty, great big snowstorms that are just fun and delightful. So that's what I always tell my registrants is imagine a great big snowstorm that knocks out all the power. How long till you're not feeling comfortable in your home anymore? Like how long till you start worrying about your safety during the middle of January, during a great big snowstorm that took off all the power? And they give us an answer from one of those selections there. I won't read them for you. And when emergency management coordinators are, you know, responding to that situation, they now have an idea of, you know, I'm obviously going to try and help my less than 6 hour people first over my people who said that they could remain safe for 3 or more days. So it's a way of helping them prioritize people. And then on the second page, we do require one primary emergency contact. We don't require a secondary and we don't require a legal guardian. They can fill in that information if they like. And we even tell our clients, because a lot of them don't necessarily have local family support, don't have a lot of people around, that even our primary emergency contacts don't have to be a local person. It just needs to be somebody they talk with kind of on a regular basis, because our program uses primary emergency contacts when we can't get a hold of the registrant. So as I'll get into in a little bit, we do 6-month updates on all of the registrants. So we reach out to them, make sure their information is up to date and accurate every 6 months. And if I can't get a hold of the registrant, I reach out to their primary emergency contact to try and figure out what's going on and what's happening to get up-to-date information. So they use that, or if there's an emergency, they can reach out to the contact and hopefully they'll tell them, you know, the registrant is vacationing in Barbados. You don't have to worry about them during this emergency, or letting them know that there's an issue. This is the last page of the application. Again, I wanted it to be a little bit bigger, so that's why it's split into the two pieces. So the top question is for 6-month updates. How do they want their method of update to be done? It can be the applicant, it can be the primary contact or the legal guardian who does the update, and it can be through any way. This is our consent form that we have that they have to sign, or on our website, they have to click I accept before they see the application form. So that's our legal around getting them to sign that consent. When we do phone applications, we send them a copy of their completed application form for them to sign and send back to us so that we get the signed consent form. We do have a lot of cases where primary emergency contact will register their loved ones. So, you know, you have an Alzheimer mom, you want to register them. So you contact me. I will do the application form with them over the phone and help and assist them and do it all with them. So, and then mail them the completed application form with a pre-stamped and addressed envelope. So they just have to get their mom to sign it or legally sign it if they have signing power. And then as soon as I get the signed application form, they can be on the registry. So that's how we do phone applications with the consent form. The main thing about our consent form is what the little purple box just showed up with on the screen. And what it means is at the start of every month, we require our emergency management coordinators, our first responders, to upload the registry into their systems, so that their systems is up to date and accurate. And there's a hard copy of the registry at the municipal office for the emergency management coordinator to be able to grab if there's an emergency at the start of every month. They do have access through our website to the information live. So they can see it live, they can have the most up-to-date information, but we require once a month that they put that information into their systems, so their systems stay up-to-date and accurate, and there's up-to-date and accurate information, like a hard copy in case, you know, the power is out and you can't access the registry, or trying to make more quick decisions. That we tell all the registrants it can take up to 45 days for your information to get logged into those systems, because we give our agencies the first 15 days of every month to log in and access it. We send them a reminder email at the start of every month to log in, that's our legal disclaimer that it can take a few days to get into everybody's systems, depending on what time of the month it is and like when you apply. Because if you applied on, you know, January 2nd for one township and they logged in January 1st to do their update, you're not waiting till February to get through into their systems. So we do have a bit of a waiting period or a delay depending on when our agencies log in to get their information, but they are required to access the information every month. So what do I do? So I am the Vulnerable Persons Registry Coordinator. I am a full-time position in this job. I do cover Sault Ste Marie as well as the Algoma Manitoulin-Sudbury Region, which you kind of seen from that map. I input all of the applications and make sure the registry is up to date and accurate. So that's completing 6-month updates, reaching out when people have passed away to make sure they get removed from the registry in a timely manner, and just trying to make sure it's as up to date and accurate. So if an emergency happens, you're not trying to help people who have moved away or have passed away, and just keeping the information relevant. I do all of the marketing, so the promotion, the marketing, the like letting people know about the program and what it's all about. I love going to all my different townships to do presentations to them, and giving them inserts to put in their tax bills, and just help promoting the program, to bring awareness about the program, so that essentially I run it all so that emergency management coordinators don't have to do a lot of that legwork, so that all they have to do is respond to emergencies and use the registry to help them make those decisions about how to respond to those emergencies. So the importance of the registry, I'm sure a lot of you already know this from looking into it and having an interest about like why this is such a great program, because you're obviously attending this presentation because you think it's a great program. But it helps promote emergency preparedness for individuals. We have brochures and information we give them. A lot of times when I ask the question, how long can you remain safe during a large scale emergency, triggers something with a lot of the individuals of like, oh, I'm really not even prepared for a large scale emergency. So I send them some information about like how to start building an emergency response kit, and like how to, you know, just start thinking about those kinds of things. It helped meet a lot of the Ontario's accessibility for Ontarians with disabilities, to try and help and support them, because those are often the individuals who, you know, have the most difficulty during large scale emergencies. So it helps protect them during those. And with the way the world and climate change is going, there's just going to be a lot more natural disasters, a lot more weird weather events that are going to happen that are going to affect this population, and it's important to protect them. So this is a way of helping protect and support individuals. A lot of the times it can, in some situations, delay going into a nursing home, which can, you know, save a lot of money on our systems to have individuals stay within their own home longer, because they know they have extra support. If, you know, they call 911 or somebody else calls 911, they have extra information about the person. So it's definitely a great program for communities. So these are some examples for you guys of how the registry has been used here in the Soo. Thankfully, here in the Soo, we've never had a large scale emergency. So it's just been used during some smaller scale emergencies. So in 2014, they had a bunch of water mains break in the east end of the Soo. And a lot of people were without water. They were being told that there was a boil. Once they got their water back, they were told it was a boil water advisory. So we went and looked at the affected area and found 11 registrants, and we reached out to all of them, made sure, do you know about the boil water advisory? Do you understand what that means? And just took a little extra care to make sure they got what was happening and what was going on. And about half of those registrants didn't even know there was a boil water advisory. They're like, what happened? Oh yeah, I was just without water for a bit and then the water came back. What do you mean I have to boil my water now? And so it's just taking a little bit of extra care, extra support to make sure they knew, yes, you're under a boil water advisory. This event happened. That means for the next, 3 days, you're going to have to boil your water in order to make it drinking safe. Another thing that happened, and I see I forgot to change the title on that slide, I'm sorry, we had a big storm power outage on Christmas Eve, and a bunch of, I believe this was in 2019, a bunch of people without power for a long period of time. So we had to work with the PUC and the Red Cross to keep our electric dependent registrants safe. During this actual event, we hit closer to the 12-hour mark. So we checked in with all of our registrants at the 6-hour mark, made sure they're okay. Most of them are doing good. They're fine. They weren't concerned about their health and safety. And then we were getting close to the 12-hour mark. So we had to re-rally the troops and recheck on all of these registrants to see who was still without power to help and assist them, because they were good at the 6-hour mark, but we're starting to reach a 12-hour mark without power in the middle of the end of December. That's not always the warmest, and making sure that they were safe and okay. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. I see that the chat has a bunch of bubbles, so I'm not sure if there's more questions to kind of go through to answer for you guys about our registry.
So Amanda, we were worried we would have to prompt people for questions, but that's not an issue at all. We have a whole bunch of questions for you. So they were coming in quite fast and furious, and we decided to just ask people that we would ask them at the end, just in case you covered it in your presentation. So I'm just going to start with the first one. This is from Danielle. Does trouble with speech language at all include difficulty speaking English as opposed to a different first language? So as a eligibility, I guess.
So that's been one of our gray areas that we've been talking about. So in Sault Ste Marie, we have a very large Italian population. So having the discussion around is not speaking English a vulnerability. And for our registry specifically, we have decided yes, that if you, especially for older adults who live alone, who don't speak English, we have added that, have accepted that to be one of our vulnerabilities and have deemed that to be the case, because I believe on our registry, it's like an 80-year-old woman who lives by herself, whose primary language is Italian and speaks very little English, and that was her only vulnerability. So that is one of our gray cases. I took it to my boss, we discussed it, and deemed, yes, this person should be on the registry, because chances are, if we had to evacuate, all of the evacuation orders are not in a language she understands or knows what's happening, or, you know, that we did deem that to be a vulnerability that we accepted on our registry. But that is one of kind of the gray cases that we would kind of talk about, and it's not an immediate yes, because if you're telling me, you know, it's maybe a younger adult who lives with their family, who has English speakers within their household, it's one of those gray areas that we would talk about and discuss, because that's how we handle our registry, is just if there's a gray, I will take it to my boss and we will have a discussion and make a call kind of from there.
Thank you. So the next question, have you connected with other populations who may, or how have you connected with other populations who might need additional support during a significant event, like people that are homeless, as an example?
So that is one area our registry does not do a very good job of addressing, because our registry is address-based. So knowing where the registrant lives, for large-scale emergencies if they're being affected, and like where to find them, and 911 integration into there, we don't really have a good solution to that. For those who are homeless, we can't accept them on our registry because we are address-based. I have to have an address and a phone number of like how to reach you to let you know about the, you know, like give you information about what's happening and where to go, and how to know if you're being affected by it. So that is, yeah, that is a gap in our program that we don't currently have a solution on really how to help or address. So that's where we falter.
Okay, great, thank you. From Kara, I'm curious about legal guidelines. What does that mean? Also, if a person is registered, is there any sort of guarantee of services, additional or standard? I think, and this Kara's from Calgary, I think we would have issues doing welfare checks on vulnerable people if a large number of people are affected.
So that's where okay, I'll make sure I answer all of these parts of the question because there's a few. So if I go back in my slideshow to our legal, that is our legal consent form. Like I said, I'll send it to you and it's on our website and everything on what our legal guidelines and our consent form is. And our part of our registry is to try and reach the 1% of the most vulnerable people. Because if this list grows too big, if they're like right now, for our region, we have just, I think there's like 450 people, 500 people on our registry for Sault Ste. Marie and the surrounding areas. But if we started getting lists into like the thousands, it starts becoming unmanageable. Because you can't go through that many people, you can't assist that many people. So that's where our guidelines and our eligibility comes into play, to try and reach that most 1% of the most vulnerable in a community, so that we're not bogging down systems. Like the police don't want to know about every vulnerability in every household, because that's then just, you know, slowing their systems down. Like our ambulance in Sault Ste. Marie only take a very select amount of information from the registry. They don't take all of it, because they would rather respond quickly than respond knowing that they are in a wheelchair with oxygen dependence, and like have, like, they don't want a bunch of information about, you know, who their primary emergency contact is. Well, no, they just want to get there. So to take that extra 2 minutes to learn about the registrant is not necessarily something they only select. They're very selective about what information they keep for their systems, because they want to get there quickly. So we do work with our criteria to make sure the list stays at a manageable level. because if you start getting too big, it doesn't become useful. That's also why we have the 24-hour support. So in theory, if the list ever started getting like really, really big in the Soo, we would probably start being pickier about that 24-hour support. So if you had, you know, a vulnerable person who lives with their parents and their parents are around all of the time, that person may not be accepted because they have that parental support to be able to help and support them during that emergency versus the same person who lives on their own who might need extra support and care. So that's how we try and kind of create that balance to try and keep the list on a manageable number, because if it gets too big, then we can't meet the legal requirements of the program of helping and assisting these individuals. Because once you have a list like this and have access to those lists and have agreed to take on the responsibility of the list, you do then have the legal obligation to make sure these individuals are safe and supported during large-scale emergencies. Some of our townships don't do small-scale emergency assistance because they're just not quite ready for that legal responsibility. They just keep it to large-scale emergencies, and if they have a large-scale emergency, they have agreed to deal with the list and access the list and help and assist those individuals during large-scale emergencies. Other townships have been like, no, I think they have a little bit more capacity that they say, no, we'll do smaller scale emergencies. If part of town is flooded out, I want to use the registry to help and assist those individuals. There's different levels of legal responsibility that a township can choose to take on based on kind of their resources, the risk level they're willing to take, and then how they want to support them, support their vulnerable people in their community. Did I cover all the questions?
Well, and I'm just very quickly, I'll just ask a little addition to that question.
Yeah.
And you might have said it in the presentation and I missed it, but in a large scale disaster and say you have all 450 people affected, do you have a priority list?
So that's where we use the how long can I care for myself during a large scale emergency. That people can take that list and sort it by less than 6 hours, 6 to 12 hours, 12 to 24 hours, and start working through that list in that way so that they, you know, aren't going to prioritize somebody who said they can be for less than 3 hours, sorry, greater than 3 days over somebody who says less than 6 hours. And they can also start even narrowing stuff down more and saying, I only want the people who live alone, who are worried for their safety for less than 6 hours, or I only want people who I know have no local family support. They live alone and they put less than 6 hours for their safety range. And I'm going to do that qualification first. And then I'm going to uncheck those who live alone and see who maybe has a partner, but still no local family support and less than 6 hours. That's where some of these questions kind of help on the application form prioritize that list to make decision-making easier based on some of the other check boxes. They can kind of narrow it down or broaden it out depending on what's kind of happening.
Great, thank you. Next question from Kara as well. Would a vulnerability have to be permanent? What if someone is temporarily vulnerable?
So people can come on and off the registry. So we do have people who have really bad mobility issues and then get their hips and their knees replaced and are like, I'm dancing, I'm great, I don't need to be on here anymore. So then they can just be removed. We also have a feature called a locked feature where you can kind of hide the registrant for a little bit. If they say have to go like have major surgery and are in the hospital for 2 months, that we can freeze or lock their account for like a 2-month period of time so they don't show on the list, but they're still there. That then when they are, you know, back home, we even have a few snowbirds who are only in the Soo 6 months of the year. So they're on the registry for those 6 months. I lock them while they're in Florida so that their information doesn't show. And then I unlock them when they come back from Florida. So there's ways to deal with some of the seasonal people, and we're more than happy to add and remove people if, you know, like I said, the most common one we have is they have a lot of mobility issues. They get their knees, their hips replaced and go back to a normal lifestyle of being able to have much better mobility and don't feel they need to be on the registry. So then we just remove them. So it's easy.
Okay, we've got lots more questions popping in, so we're going to fly through these. So, and Jody, I think we answered your question about the registry being reviewed in the presentation, or Stephanie did. So, Christina, I've heard that some local VPRs around Canada are tied into 911, similar to how yours is, but not all of them. I'm curious how that integration was achieved.
So some VPRs are just police-based. So you register on a police website using their application form and go that way. Versus ours, we sat down with our police, fire, and ambulance and found out what information of the registry would A, be useful for them, B, manageable for them. And we have reports that they can log into every month that they manually put into their systems. Our fire department allows for a direct link into their system. They have a program called Crisis that they can upload something called a shape file into their systems every month, and it overrides the VPR information from the last month, updating all the information that we were able to kind of do that direct connect link into their system that way. The police were not. They require a higher level of security that they didn't want a direct link into their system. So our Sault Ste. Marie police agreed to manually enter information about registrants into the system. So they have a report that shows like registrants was changed information, new registrants and removed. So once a month they have a person who spends a bit of time updating their systems and putting the information manually into their systems, because their system requires a super high level security that they don't want things getting downloaded into it. Sorry, I'm not the most technical person, but that's about the best I can explain to you. Versus the Sault Ste. Marie Fire Department doesn't have the same level as the police, or we already send them other things. That theirs is direct, just kind of like downloaded into their system and appears that way. So is each organization taking a buy-in? Here in Sault Ste. Marie, that's why we don't have the 911 feature in some of our other jurisdictions, because we haven't been able to get the same buy-in from like the Ontario Provincial Police and some of the local fire departments, because each one of these townships have their own local fire department. So it's definitely not easy to get the different buy-ins. Sometimes it's easier when it's more like a city-based system to get them to go into it. And the different levels of how you can integrate in with the systems is sometimes difficult. Like we were able to do an easy integration into the fire department system, a not so easy integration into the police system. So that's how we've kind of got it to work, but it's not a perfect system because we are only in Sault Ste. Marie for the 911 integration. We're not the Algoma, Manitoulin-Sudbury region, which is the bigger map.
And that's kind of our area of focus over the next little while as well.
Okay, and then I have a question from Brett. What percentage of your total population ends up registering?
So the goal is the top 1% of vulnerable. So I'm not sure what that actually is. Like I know for Sault Ste. Marie locally, we have like 350, and I believe there's 750 people who live in the Soo. Not sure. 75,000. There's 75,000 people who live in the Soo, and we have about 350 people on the registry. So if somebody wants to do that math for me, that's the current Soo, and I can't do the other region because I don't know the population of that whole area. And there's about 150 people on that registry. But we are working on expanding that registry. That number is low for the Algoma, Manitoulin-Sudbury. The Sault Ste. Marie has always kind of stayed around the 300-400 mark, and we usually have a population of about 75,000 people. So whatever that math is.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. And then where does the funding for the VPR position come from? And I think you said it at the beginning, but and is it ongoing and sustainable?
Yeah, so our funding comes from a few different places. First, in Ontario, we have legislation that there has to be an accessibility center for cities over a certain size. They have to have accessibility programming, accessibility centers. So the city of Sault Ste. Marie partially funds this through their accessibility program. We get funding through the United Way for the VPR coordinator. And we also have things called our social service administration boards, which handles like our Ontario Works, our childcare, geared to income housing. So they're called the social administration boards. I'm not sure what your guys' equivalent would be, but we also get funding from them as well to support. We got the original grant to set up the program through what was called Barrier Free Algoma, grant funding to get the program, but we're primarily funded through the municipality, the United Way, and then our social services board, social administration boards, which I'm sure there'd be some sort of equivalent for you guys there that doesn't have the same name.
Great. And from Jerome, how do you reduce the financial burdens of creating an emergency kit for vulnerable populations?
So our city has this section on their website. It's called Emergency Kit in 18 days or 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks. That's what it is. And so I send it to them. It's a kit essentially you can bill in 8 weeks, and it kind of stretches out the burden of an emergency kit over 8 weeks, so that it's less of a honus of like, you know, like I'm going to spend $150 on this big expensive kit versus the first week I'm just going to buy water bottles to put in the basement so that there's fresh water if I need it. And then the next week I'm just going to buy a little bit extra food to, again, put in the basement in case there's an emergency. Next time I'm at my doctor, I'm just going to ask if he'd give me a small extra prescription to have in the basement for my emergency kit. So it breaks it down into a more of an 8-week manageable steps versus being like, go spend $200 on a fancy emergency kit from Canadian Tire or wherever you get emergency kits from, or else you can find emergency kits. So that's kind of where, that's one of the resources I often give is this 8-week to a kit so that it's stretched out a little bit further so it's not as big as a financial burden.
Great. So next question. Those folks among the registrants contacted who didn't know about the boil water advisory, that could be an indication of broader communication challenges. Very possible that a similar proportion of the broader population was unaware. Any notion that issues like this could act as a canary in the coal mine, raising concerns about broader issues?
Well, I was not in the position when the boil water advisory happened, so I don't really know a lot of the specifics as to like what kind of communication was done. I just know that's one of our prime examples is we reached out to the registrants at the time, but that would be kind of a city communication issue that they would have to work on for notifying and being able to reach out to their population to make sure. We just kind of work from a vulnerable persons registry standpoint of being able to help and assist those vulnerable during emergencies and kind of leave the rest of the communication of emergencies to the rest of the population to an emergency management coordinator.
Okay, and one of the participants did the math for you. So it's 1 in 2,000 people are registered, about 0.05%.
That's not bad. Excellent, thank you.
Next question. Do you see that the same address location limitation that is restricting homeless populations is also impacting First Nation registrations? My understanding is that the First Nations community use a different addressing system, may not be applicable here.
We can adapt the address system base to work on reserves because like as long as there's an address that we can kind of figure out and be able to put into systems, because first responders would have some sort of system to link into or kind of know how to find people that might be able to work. Because like our part of another division of the Innovation Center has to do with like addresses and mapping and things like that, and helping create address and mapping systems. It's called the Acorn Information Center. We're technically part of them, but there's another side. So those are problems we could figure out as long as the person has an address. It's when there's no address or no fixed location that we really start running into problems. We can make reserves and Aboriginal communities works, even if they're not traditional addresses. There just has to be an address to link the person to, versus with homelessness, they're not always at the same spot. They're not always in the same spot. So it's more difficult to.
I think
Okay.
I've run through all the questions that were in the chat. We
Okay.
had lots of people just saying thanks for the presentations, and we'll share that to you, and give people kudos to certain parts of the presentation. But if there's anybody that wants to come off mute or wants to still fire off some questions to Amanda, that would be just fine.
I see one just came in from Guy Choquette. What department do you work for?
Okay, I'll give you the little tree. So I'm part of the Sault Ste Marie Innovation Center, and then I'm under Acorn Information Solutions. And then the VPR is its own little program under Acorn Information Solutions. But under Acorn, there's also a bunch of GIS technicians who work on mapping and addresses, and I believe there's even people who help the fire department keep addresses up to date and send them up to date addresses. So I'm part of Acorn Information Solutions. That kind of answers the little tree. So you know the organizational charts that kind of happen. So.
Thank you. And if you permit me to say a few words. I don't know if you're aware, but the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, so that's where Fort McMurray is located, actually has a Vulnerable Persons Registry. And in the 2020 floods with the ice jam, the registry was enacted, and I know there was a number of registrants that were evacuated to a similar location. And it's just to make the comment, one of the things that that's important is to have a plan to support those individuals once they've been evacuated, but it was the congregate evacuation. So I just want to share, there's probably a variety of scenarios of, you know, it's one thing to monitor people while they're still in home, but evacuation and, you know, for a number of days. So anyways, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, we were instrumental in helping Wood Buffalo get their VPR set up. It was just on the tail. I think you guys got your VPR set up like just as I was starting into the position, so I got to kind of see a little bit about how that happened. But yeah, we've been. I got the tail end of when Wood Buffalo got its VPR set up.
Thanks for that. I saw there was a broad question, are similar initiatives planned in Alberta? We did do a scan of kind of what's out there, and Wood Buffalo certainly came up, and Lake Louise apparently, and Bruderheim. So there are a few, all doing things a little bit differently, but that's something that we're kind of interested in on the Disaster and Emergency Management group on CORE is learning about those. And you know, what do you think about this? Do you think this is something that might be a good idea in your community or in general? And yeah, any other questions for Amanda? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I learned a lot. I thought I knew a lot about your program, and now I know a lot more. So just wanted to thank you very much for your time today and for sharing everything and being so open with, you know, giving out your information and your registration package. I'm interested in that 8-week emergency kit. I think somebody else in the chat is interested in that as well.
I will find the link because it was really cool. I remember it was found it on the city website. That's something they kind of post about and do. So I will include that link as well so you guys can see I think it's 8. I now am second guessing myself because it's been a while since I looked at it, but I will send you the link to it as well.
No worries. We will find that. And I just have a couple last slides to share, and Amanda, as she said, will provide her slide deck. So we'll put that up on the CORE website along with a copy of this recording. There we go. So again, thank you for participating today. You will be getting a survey to let us know what you thought about this presentation, and we're really interested in what other presentations you would like to see. So we're happy to go do the legwork to find folks. Just let us know what that might look like for you. We are also actively looking for people to join our group. So there's just a group on CORE Alberta. It's free. There's no work involved yet. But yeah, just looking for some folks to help us provide some guidance around what this group can and should do and what materials we provide on there. So please visit us on CORE. We do have some materials there now. We have a guide for people at risk of going missing that we have now translated into 9 different languages that we're super excited about. So yeah, join us there, and we would love to have you get engaged. And again, thanks for being here today. We're giving you back 20 minutes of your day, so we're ending a little bit early. Stephanie, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a reminder that in CORE, you should be able to share your own resources in the groups. So that group that Kim mentioned, if you have resources that would really benefit this conversation, you can add them to the group when you're in a group, and you can have conversation with the other participants in the group. So there's lots of elements there to be involved with.
And Kim, any last comments?
No, just echo, that was just fabulous. Gets me all excited about how we can work together to do some of this stuff. But it's a big task, so it's not as clear cut as you sort of think it might be. It will just set up a little registry. So thank you, Amanda, for your good work.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks.